Good day. My name is Ugochukwu Ukwebu. I am a Nanodegree lead with the Udacity ALX Cloud Developer Program. This video is part of a multi-part video walkthrough of Project 3, Refactor Monolith into Microservices. In part 1 of this video walkthrough, I ran the project as a monolith application locally in my system. In the second part of this video series, I will be running the project locally in a multi-container environment. So let's get started. So where do we start? We begin with the instructions. Like I've always maintained, if we follow the instructions the best that we can, we limit the number of errors we are likely to make. The instructions are well detailed and well laid out. And what we just need to do is follow and adhere to the solid principles. So part 2, run the project locally in a multi-container environment. First of all, the objective of this part is to refactor the monolith application into microservices and set up each microservice to be run in its own Docker container. So every student should have access to this dashboard. So I encourage you to go look it up, read up the steps. And of course, this assumes you've set up your environment. You have your Docker desktop, you have your energy, and you've done all the things you need to do, and you have your RDS instance, either locally or remote, running with your connect variables well set up. So let's start with setting up our environment variables again. So I go to my terminal. I run. Okay, first let's show what's happening. If I do there's nothing there. When I run that command again. So we have environment variables set up. The next thing is we refactor a backend API. So basically, the backend API is the same backend API. We're going to refactor it and separate it into two parts, one for feed and one for user. So I already have my local directory structure here. This is the Udagram API feed. We're going to break apart into two directories. I've already set up this Udagram API user. It's empty for now. So I'll pretty much go here, copy everything here, and go paste it in the Udagram API user directory. So while that is happening, if I come back, so the objective is we're pretty much duplicating what we had in the API Udagram backend code into a folder for Udagram API feed and a folder for Udagram API user. So we create two new directories as services with the names above, copy the backends that are coded into the above individual services, and then break apart a monolith. Each of the services above will have the following directory structure with a lot of duplicate code. So let's see. All right, while that is copying, let's get ready for what we need to do. So the instruction set is pretty explicit. We're going to have, these are the content in the directory. We have this mock folder. It's going to be common to both folders or directories, no change. Node modules auto-generated, why not to copy that? And we're going to add that node modules to git ignore and docker ignore files. Package lock auto-generated, do not copy. Well, what I'm going to do is once the copy finishes, I'm going to delete those ones we ought not to have copied into that place. Source config, no change. So the to-dos highlights where we're going to make our changes, right? In the controllers VO to do, we're going to make changes. We're going to keep either, well, I'll show you what steps we're going to do when we get there. We're going to delete one of the other folder that is not necessary. We're going to make changes to index.router.ts file. We're going to make changes to the model.index.ts files. We're going to make changes to the migrations folder. We're going to make changes to the server.ts file. Of course, Docker file, and then Docker ignore file. So, okay, our copy is still happening. And of course, we're going to create Docker files for the two backend services. Both ways are going to be common. So it's going to be something like this. And then we're also going to refactor the front-end application. We just need to add a Docker file to the Udagram front-end directory. This is the content of the Docker file. And of course, we're going to, this tip is very important. Add .docker ignore to each of the services above and mention node modules in that file. It will ensure that node modules will not be included in the Docker copy commands. This is very important because that node modules folder or directory, it can be quite voluminous, and including its copy commands can we're pretty copying a voluminous folder that we don't really need, right? So just a waste of time. Okay, how would containers discover each other and communicate? We're going to use another container named reverse proxy running the Nginx server. The reverse proxy will help add another layer between the front end and back end API so that the front end only uses a single endpoint and doesn't realize it's deployed separately. It is one of the approaches and not necessarily the only way to deploy services, right? So that's important. To set up the reverse proxy container, we'll follow the steps below. We're going to create a new directory with the reverse proxy. We're going to create a Docker file with the content there. And we're also going to create the nginx.conf file that will associate the service with, associate all the service endpoints as follows. When we get there, we'll have to be careful here with the way we name or the way you update the nginx.conf file, because this is very important. The nginx container will expose 8080 ports. The configuration file above in the server section, in the configuration file above in the server section, it will route the http://localhost:8080/API/view/feed request to the backend user :8080 container. The same applies for the localhost :8080/API/view/users request. Okay, our copy is still happening. So this is a diagram showing the structure of the microservices application, image courtesy of UND. So the idea being that when a user from his client makes a request to our application, his request will hit the front end, and the front end will direct the request to reverse proxy, and the reverse proxy will direct requests to either of the backend services, depending on what the request queried for, and then send the outcome of the command to the front end to serve the client. And this will be the directory structure. At this moment, our project directory would have the following structure. as once we've broken up our code into the Udagram API feed and Udagram API folders, and then front end. Basically, we're going to have these 4 directories, and this is what it's going to look like, comparing the startup versus the current state of the project directory. We're going to be using Docker Compose to build and run multiple Docker containers. And we're told to note the ultimate objective of this step is to have the Docker images for each microservice ready locally. This step can also be done manually by building and running containers one by one, right? So basically, we could either do it in one go, or we do it manually one by one. Okay, so our copy is complete. So we scroll up to follow how we're supposed to do the copy. All right, so from here, the first thing we notice is that the mock directory. Okay, first of all, what I want to do is, I pretty much copied everything from this Udagram API feed. I duplicated it, copied everything into the API user. So instead of creating another directory for the API user, let me just rename this one to API feed, right? Okay, so that's good. So let me begin from API feed, and following those instructions here. Mock folder is common, no change. Node modules, we're not to copy this, right? And we are to add this to our git ignore file. So we're not supposed to copy it. So the equivalent to achieve the same thing is we come here and delete it. So pardon, delete it. The node modules, we can create it when we run npm I. Instructions of what to update will be in our package.json file. So okay, that's done. Okay, node modules folder gone. Package.log auto generated. We're not supposed to copy that, so we can pretty much just come and delete that here. Yeah, delete. Source config command no change. Controllers.vo. Okay, maybe I should even do this from within the terminal. Controllers.vo. Okay, let me come there in the controllers. Source controllers vo. Since we're here, it's all about feed, we can delete the users, right? Okay, so let me try to do this from within VS Code terminal. So pretty much the copies I did outside of this VS Code environment is pretty much replicated here. So we have our Udagram API user directory and Udagram API feed directory. So I'll start making changes here. So come in here, controllers, right? View. Okay, so you see we're in the Udagram API feed. So basically we don't need the users here. So that's what this means here. In the controllers, keep either feed or user service, right? So when we are in the feed, we don't need the users. So we delete this folder here. Yeah, I want to delete it. Okay. So we've removed the users folder in the feeds subfolder. So I go to index of router.ts and then remove code. Since we're in the feed subdirectory, we remove code related to the users. So pretty much take this out. Also take users out. Then okay, that looks good. Feed, taking away things that's reference user. So I save that. And then we also go to model.index.cs. And if we're in feed, so we'll take away things that reference user, that's out. And these two goes, right? So we save that. Let me see, what next? Migrations, remove the JSON related to other. So we come to migrations. We're in the feed. So we don't need user here. So we delete that. Let's move to recycle bin. We'll go to server.cs. We're in feed. So we take things that we related to user off, right? It's important we take this user models off, right? Another thing when feed. So it's another one related to user. So let's take that off. Okay. Feed, take things related to user off. All right, so that's looking good right now. Let's double check. Okay, so let me save that. Feed. Okay, Docker file. We'll create a new Docker file. Okay. All right. So let me here cd into Udagram API feed. Where's the Docker file going to be? It's going to be in the root of that subfolder. So one way I like to create my Docker file is to use the touch command. Touch Docker file. Okay, so that should have created Docker file. And so let me create the Docker ignore too. Touch dot Docker ignore. Right. So in my Docker ignore, I'm supposed to include the node modules. Okay, so let's see what that does. I come here. Okay, let's look at Docker ignore. Okay, so wow, that does that 2 times. So it's important we just remove one, right? And Control S there. Right, so that's what it ought to be. So let's save that and close that Docker ignore. Then where's that Docker file? As we're instructed, the Docker file in the above 2 backend services will be like this, right? So I think I have something I've used somewhere. So let me just pretty much take that Docker file and use that same Docker file here. It's pretty much similar to what I have there. Okay, and I save that. So you can pretty much copy what's here. But so, thing about copying and paste is that you might not, it's more advisable for you to type these things, right? So in the other command, I typed it manually. So it's safer for me to just copy something I've used before that I know has worked and paste it. So I advise you copy these lines manually. I mean, type these lines manually in your Docker file so that you know that you've not included any hidden any hidden any hidden commands or any other hidden values in that file. Okay, so yeah, it's not a hard requirement to use the exact same Docker file above. Feel free to use other base images or optimize the commands, right? I pretty much did that. So I think I have that there. Everything here saved. And okay, let me go do the same thing. Okay, yeah, I've done this for API feed. So I'm going to go back and do that for API user, API feed. So I go into the API user subfolder. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the node modules. We don't need that. So I come back, mock folder is common and no change. Node modules auto-generated. I'm going to do an npmi, but let me first take this out. Delete. Yeah, I want to delete that. Move to the recycle bin. Okay, node modules folder gone. Package load, package lock the JSON file auto delete auto. So that's it there. So I delete that too. Yep. Source config common no change controllers view. So I go here, controllers view. All right. When the Udagram API user subdirectory. So here we don't need this feed service. So we delete it. That's what that means here. This line here, keep either feed or user service. Then we go to index or router.ts and we remove the lines that reference the feed service. So like this line goes, this line goes. Okay, so that's good here. Let's save that. And then we'll go to model.index file and we remove the lines that reference the feed service. Okay, so that's that. That's that. I will save that. What else do we need to do? Okay, in migrations folder, go to a similar thing. We're in the user subfolder, so we remove the migrations file that reference feed. Delete. What else? In services, remove code related server.cs, remove code related to the other. So we're in user, we remove code referencing feed. So this is referencing feed here. So we take that off. Let's go down. Code referencing feed. So this is also referencing feed. Take that off. And that looks good to go. So we'll save that. Okay, so in Docker file, we'll create a new Docker file. Okay, so I come out of here. Uh, Let me look at that properly. Docker ignore. See that. Okay, so I think I still have where's my Docker file? I still have the exact theme I pasted from the other place. So I saved this here too. So that's the exact same things we did the other time for in the other subdirectory. Um, Before I move on, okay, so that's Dockerfile for the above two backends will be like this. So all right, so in the git ignore here, I like to make sure that node modules is present here. Okay, we have node modules there already. So let me be sure about git ignore here too. Yeah, we have node modules here too. So that's fine. That's fine there. All right, so we also need to refactor the front end application. We just need to add the Docker file to the Udacity front end directory. So I come here, cd, come out here, cd. Okay. Let me also add Docker ignore. Okay, this happened fine. So just added node modules once here. So I have Docker file. Should pretty much be empty for now. So let me go copy something I know optimized before. So I pretty much copy this and paste it there. If you look, it's still pretty much exactly the same thing we have here. The instructions build from develop./ionic latest/ionic. So I save this. So those are the lines of the command. All right, I have that. Okay. All right, this is looking good. We've done npm install here. So I'll pretty much leave everything here as it is. Okay, this tip, add the Docker ignore to each of the services above and mention node modules in that file. It will ensure that the node modules will not be included in the Docker copy commands, right? So I've done that. I think I've reviewed this. So now, one more thing. We have to create a new directory, Udacity reverse proxy. So currently, let's say what our directory structure looks like. Okay, so we have Udacity API feed, Udacity API user, Udacity front end. Okay. Okay, Udacity front end. So I'll create the Udacity reverse proxy subdirectory. So I come out one step. Just the command to make a directory. Okay. Udacity reverse proxy. Okay, so we have that there. Let's cd into that. Okay, so what do we do here? Okay, we'll create a Docker file here too. Now touch Docker file. Okay, so let me just lazily go copy that same Docker file. It's just 2 lines. Okay, that's what the instruction. Create a new Docker file, new directory, put diagram reverse proxy, create a Docker file. Okay, create an nginx.conf file. So I come back here. Uh, okay. So what will our nginx.conf file contain? It's going to associate the endpoints as such. So pretty much, I think I've manually typed this. I'm a little wary about just copying and pasting files into Docker files. So I pretty much go pick up what I know has worked, which I pretty much typed manually. So I'll just there's some very little changes between what I have here and what we're giving here. Uh this backend server is going to be the name of our container. This you can see this backend user, right? It's going to be the name of our container when we split things into microservices. So that naming is important, very important. I've adjusted it, I've changed it to API user, right? So if you feel like retaining with what you have here, just make sure it's fine, right? Just make sure you have notes. When you start naming your containers, you're also going to name it backend user. In my own situation, I've altered it to API user so that it just aligns with this directory structure we have here, API user, API feed, right? So just, I think that's about the same. The only change I have with my own code and what's we're given here. Uh, it's very, we have to be very careful when we are copying and pasting code. It helps to understand what the different lines are saying. Because if I name it something here and then in my containers deployment file, I give it another name, it won't be able to discover the services as intended. So so don't worry, when we get there, you will see what I mean. So I've done this. I'm going to save that. Create nginx.conf file that will associate the service endpoints. So that's what I just did. The nginx container will expose the 8080 ports, just like this. You could just read this up and follow the links there to documentation that will explain what we have. So this is our current directory structure. So let's open this up and see how things line up here. Let's closing things up. So that's, I have better real estate view of what I'm doing. Okay, so let's save here. All right. So these are directory structure. Pretty much similar. We have the Udagram API feed, Udagram API user, Udagram front end, and then the Udagram reverse proxy directories, right? So of course, each of them have their source subdirectories, right? Just as listed in the instructions manual. So that's done. Everything's set up. Uh, we're ready to move to the next phase of our instruction steps. Okay, comparing starter versus current state. So I think we just looked that up. You could advise you to look into it to observe what has changed and what's to get a better understanding of the relationships between the two folder structures. Okay, we're going to use Docker Compose to build and run multiple Docker containers. The ultimate objective step is to have Docker images for each micro service ready locally. This step can also be done manually by building and running containers one by one. Once you have created the Docker file in each of the following service directories, you can use the Docker Compose command to build and run multiple Docker image containers at once. Okay, so we use the Docker Compose command. The Docker Compose command uses a YAML file to configure your application services. So I've pretty much opened that link. Okay, this is documentation that explains the Docker Compose command. So meaning you create and start all services from your configuration file with a single command. Otherwise, you have to individually build containers one by one for each of your services. Sometimes it's helpful to build one by one, and sometimes if the resources and tools you have at your available at can allow you build one by one, then fine, you can go ahead and do that. Let's see what we can do here. In this project's parent directory, create a Docker Compose build file. Okay, we should create. Let's see what that Docker Compose. So it's going to look like this. Okay, this is text. So I think I can pretty much copy this. Oh, okay, yeah. So let me do that. So this is in the parent directory. So let's see Docker Compose build. Docker Compose build.yaml file. So we're told to do that to the parent subdirectory. So that's, we're gonna cd out a little bit here. In the parent directory, so we create touch touch command. Let's see, Docker compose .yaml. Okay, so we have that there, and then we paste that. Okay, how did I name this? Reverse. Okay, now this is a very important part. I have to be careful with the naming. Reverse proxy, backend user, backend feed, front end. So naming Udagram reverse proxy, Udagram API user, Udagram API feed, Udagram front end. Okay, local. So that's looking good. Okay, that's looking good. So let's save that. Let me compare that what I've have previously. So it lines up properly. Okay, so I want this to line up a little bit better with my naming structure that I chose here. So I'll just call this API user and call this API feed. You can choose to remain with default naming convention. Just make sure you do the things appropriately. You understand what you're doing, everything you're doing. Okay, so that's that. Everything is looking good. In image versioning, we could versioning, I'd like to do this, right? So let me have V4A. So I want to line up everything. So this one is going to be V4A. I'm anticipating that I could do multiple builds, right? So, okay, so that's that. So let's save that. All right, so that's that. Let's go back to our instructions. All right. So I'm ready to go. Hmm. All right. All right. Uh okay, now before I do this, uh to build all the images in one go, is a recommended step that was not included there. Okay, I've been working on my main branch. It's not the best practice. So let me just at this point, I've not done any save, so I could create a dev branch where I'm working. So let me just git check out uh dev. All right. So I'm in dev. All right. Git add all, git commit, breaking monolith up to micro. All right. So, okay. All right. So I'm good for now. Okay. So yeah, I was going to get to a point. So at this point, I like to CD into the U diagram. We made some changes there and we deleted some package.log files, package.log.json files. So let me do API feed, right? And in this point, let's say our current directory structure. All right. So I'm going to do an npm install here, right? npm install to download package dependencies. It's an important step because when Docker is building, it's going to use our definitions in the package.json file to build appropriately. So it's an important step to take. So while that's happening, let's see what next okay. Of course, just a reminder of the version of the different packages we are using. What node version am I using? I'm using node version 12.8. Uh, is it going to be, I think, AWS CLI. This doesn't matter too much. I supposed to have done AWS version? Okay, so I'm using AWS CLI 2.7 dot 27. Still happening here. What CTL client am I using? Okay. Uh, I'm using kubectl client version 1.25.0. I'm using customized version 4.5.7. All right, so let's see what's happening here. Packages are still downloading. Okay. All right, as a precautionary measure, let me run this again. Okay, what am I doing? Okay, I didn't do that properly. All right. All right, so that's fine. I want to repeat the same process in the Udagram API user subdirectory. So I come here, step out one directory, cd npm install here. So what TypeScript version am I using? Okay, so I'm using TypeScript version 4.8.3. I think I'm deliberately doing this to give you a hint of dependencies that worked together successfully, or packages that work together successfully. All right, so npm I done. So let's look at our instructions and see what next to do. Okay, we're to create images with the Docker compose command. So first of all, let me even see what images do I have. Okay, I have quite a number of images. I've been doing a lot of preparation and okay, let's see. So let me do Docker image prune, right? So this should remove unused and dangling images. Yes, I want to do that. So that's done. So at this point, okay, I need to come out of this directory. CD this is not going to relevant, but let me still do it. All right. Okay, let me see the folders I have. I have my Docker Compose view, the YAML file there. Let me go through, give everything a second look again. So my images were built using 4A. I think Udacity front end. So this is important, right? Udacity front end, it should tally with this folder name here because it's pretty much going to build the image with this name and tag version in this subdirectory. So you have your Udacity front end, Udacity API feed, Udacity API feed, Udacity API user, Udacity API user, uh, then Udacity reverse proxy here. So that's looking good. So I do just like we have here. I'm going to run this Docker compose command, this set of command. So I'm going to type it now. And we're going to build in parallel. So Docker compose build parallel. So let's go. I know this is a tricky part, right? You can be limited by several factors. Building images Docker images, some things can limit you. Some of those things are your system requirements. To run, first of all, for this to happen successfully, you might have noticed I have my Docker desktop running in the background. So it has to be there, else the command won't work. And it's pretty much signed in to Docker Hub. So that allows me to run that command. Uh, you should also have a system with some generous RAM. My system RAM is 12 gig RAM. Minimum you need to run Docker is 4 gig RAM, but you need considerable from experience, you need at least 8 gig, a system with an 8 gig RAM uh, to successfully run most Docker images. And then you also need a pretty decent internet connection. So a failure here and there could cause a failed build of your Docker images. So let's see how this goes. Normally, from experience, if I'm trying to build images, Docker images of all the 4 directories at one go, if it fails, I could try again. If it fails, you could just go into the directories and build the images there directly with Docker build dash t, then use the images just like it is here, and then build after that dash dot, right, to build in those current directories. So I would cd into those different directories and then build individually. But let's see, I think I might be able to get away with trying to build at one go. If that's fine, that saves me a lot of headache. So I'm going, normally reverse proxy is usually the smallest of the images to build and it's built quickest and it usually goes. So reverse proxy build, we're currently building, okay, API feed is gone successfully. Okay, oh no, we're still on API feed and API user, right? Of course, you can see some cached things there. So it's not, I've built some of these images locally, so it's pretty much, normally with way Docker builds, when you give it a build command, it's going to first search in your local directory, your local environment for the files it's about to build. If it finds it there, it picks up from there and builds its images. If it doesn't find it there, then it goes online to go pull the latest version of those images down to your local environment to build its images, right? So that's why you see some of those lines of cached there. But so it's relying on cache too. It has its benefits and it's also had its drawbacks. If I feel like it's the images it's building is conflicting with what I wanted to build, I'm going to use a command to clear my cache. But I think let's see how this goes. Everything looking good thus far. Right now, I'm at the stage of building the front end image. This is really the most voluminous, but it should go fine. All right, so that happened fine. No hitches. Uh, if I run Docker images, you notice that I built a series of 4A versioned images. So you can see reverse proxy 4A here. Let me go up a little bit to see the others. Let me scroll up a little bit. You can see Udagram API feed 4A. Udagram API is 4A. Front end is tagged local. So Udagram front end local. So that's done. The next thing now is I'm going to create another file, Docker Compose. Right now, I just have Docker Compose built here. So I'm going to create. Okay, let's look at our instructions here. So I just finished step 3, creating the images. I've created the images using Docker Compose build file. So now I'm going to run containers. To run containers, I'm going to use create another YAML file called Docker Compose or YAML file. So let's look at what's going to look like. Let me delete this after I'm done with this. So this is what Docker Compose the YAML file is going to look like. All right. So pretty much copy everything. Let's go. No big deal. Let's copy everything as it is text. So the risk of copying something foreign here is minimized. So first of all, let me create its Docker. Docker Compose the YAML, right? All right. So where's that? Okay. So it sits empty. So I paste what I just copied from the link we were given here. Okay, so now there are meanings to this. You can see, I think we've already set up all these variables as instructed. So what changes? How did I version my images? Because it's very important here. So how did I version my reverse proxy? I called it reverse proxy v4a. So I'll come here, the image is reverse proxy colon v4a. This is okay. Depends on, remember I named it API user and API feed. So I change my backend to API user, backend feed. I'm going to change this to API feed, API feed. Reverse proxy. Okay, I'm going to call this API user, API user, image, Udagram, API user tag version v4a. I think I've done this Postgres username, Postgres password, Postgres DB, AWS region, filled up with these steps. Okay, backend feed, API feed. I hope I'm doing the things correctly. Let's see. Okay, looking good. API feed. Okay, Udagram API feed, V4A. Every other step looking good. Front end, how did I name it? Okay, yeah, this is important. Front end, how did I name it the other time? Okay, still front end, still okay. Though I could still change the name in here, but so we can go. Udagram front end local. So I think I do have that. Udagram front end local. Let me be sure about that. Okay, yeah, I have that. So I have Udagram front end local. Image is appropriately named. Let me double check. All right, so let me save that. So I'm going to so create another file, Docker Compose YAML file, done that. And once you have the YAML file above ready, your project directory, you can start the application using Docker Compose up. So this is a moment of truth here. So I go to my terminal. Oh, no, not there. Save. Come here. Docker Compose up. Moment of truth. All right, looking good. So it tells us our server is running at 8100. So let's click that. All right. Voila. So uh we visit that and we have successfully broken our application into microservices. It still looks like what it was when we finished with the monolith application yesterday or in the previous in the part one of the video. So we've refactored, but the system still sees the application still looks the same. Uh, so that's that there. We visit localhost 8100 to verify that images are running. So if we come locally, I think, so that's that. If we test it, everything works as it is, as it should. So I come here. Okay, let me see. Let me try create a new post. What do I have? Let me see what photo I can pick up from my local environment. Uh, Let me pick up documents, digital marketing. Okay, let me see. What do I have here? Okay, Happy Engineers Day. Open. Happy engineers. Happy cloud developers. All right, so that goes. We split the application from a monolith to microservices, and it's still working. Okay, or two. So tested all that. What else do we want to do? So we can go down. That's working fine. So we can just do a control C out of here. When we get out here, we stop in our containers. All right. Gracefully stopping containers. All right. So we can do a Docker. I think we've done it before, but let's still do it. That is how to Docker images. Just to follow up what we have there. And we have Docker. Oh, I've just showed up my containers. So Docker PS would not even show anything. All right. I just shut down my containers. I could have earlier done the PS in a separate terminal, but if we had done it, it would be fine, right? So that's it for part two. We've run a project locally in a multi-container environment, and that was a success, right? So this is the next stage. In the next part, we're going to go ahead. No troubleshooting here. We didn't have any errors. No troubleshoot. Next part is going to be continuous integration. But if you run into difficulties, uh, just look at your troubleshooting tab, right? A lot of the steps, it's a lot of the advice is there. Okay, let me just do this Docker Compose config. So sometimes you want to be sure what variables are you using. Are you using the right variables? Let me be sure. If I run Docker Compose config, I might expose sensitive credentials, right? So if you're not sure if you've set your environment variables properly, use Docker Compose config to look at things right? So we've run the project locally in a multi-container environment, and that's fine. I wish you, when you're running your own, I hope you follow the steps and you have a hassle-free uh, refactoring process. So thank you. In the next step, we'll move on to continuous integration. So this is the end of the video here. Thank you. Once again, my name is Ugochukwu uh, Ukwebu, cloud developer Nanodegree lead with the Udacity ALX cloud developer program. If you have questions, feel free to reach me on Slack or LinkedIn, and I will try my best to help you. Thank you very much.